how can we look so strong for Putin to be afraid not to attack us? They still can't comprehend the idea that European soldiers of European nations will be fighting, which means we'll be dying. So it's your talks about, oh, we'll do this and that. It's Putin is laughing at the whole discussion about Ukraine joining NATO or not is irrelevant, because NATO was built for one war only, to stop Russian aggression in Europe. And Ukraine is the only country which is fighting this war, and the entire NATO is trying not to fight this war.
Welcome to Channel 24. Today I'm joined by Garry Kasparov, one of the prominent voices of Russian opposition and the world chess champion. And we have a lot to unpack today. So Garry, it's my pleasure to have you here in our studio. Welcome.
Always a pleasure to be with you.
So Garry, the world heard your powerful speech yesterday on the security conference in Canada. And you spoke with extraordinary clarity about Russia, Ukraine, NATO, and responsibility of democracies in the world. And I would like to elaborate and continue on that conversation, because it's very hard to cope on news these days. So did you think that your powerful speech was delivered to the audience? Because for me, as a Ukrainian, as a journalist, it was sounded like a cry from the heart from you.
This is the best, show Putin can hope for. Not a single straight answer. It's not about how many weapons you have, ammunition. It's, are you willing to fight and die? Yeah, it was not out of desperation, but out of frustration. Because I have been hearing all these speeches, the same I heard in Halifax, talking about the free world, Western Europe, the United States, Nordic countries, all providing help to Ukraine, and it's kind of congratulating themselves. So we did this, we did that, and NATO has been reborn, and it's still a war, and I got so frustrated, and that's it. Yeah, it was really a cry. I mean, just looked at them, saying, "What are you talking about?" And one of the comments there was about this brigade in Latvia led by Canadians, because I was sitting next to the Canadian chairman of Joint Chief of Staff. So and she was also kind of very proud of Canadian-led brigade. My simple question is, will they fight Russians? Will they shoot at Russian troops if they cross the border? Unfortunately, I knew the answer. She knew the answer. The problem is the Europe and other allies. America is, of course, a separate story. They still pretend that they can be part of the war without actually fighting Russia, without being engaged directly in the war. I think this is it's sitting on these two chairs. It just doesn't work anymore. Ukraine is bleeding, and the only reason why Putin couldn't realize his wildest dreams of restoring Soviet influence in Eastern Europe is because Ukraine is still there. We all pray for Ukrainian heroism and resilience, but you can't do it forever. Europe preparing for war. You look at European budgets, you look at European provisions in their strategies. But behind all these preparations, there's one thought. How can we look so strong for Putin to be afraid not to attack us? They still can't comprehend the idea that European soldiers of European nations will be fighting, which means we'll be dying. And I find it absolutely unacceptable. And also, I believe that this kind of double standards and dualism and illustration of cowardice emboldens Putin. That's why Putin is making speeches that are just raising the stakes. What he said a couple of days ago was a clear indication that he had no interest in a deal. He doesn't believe Ukraine is an independent state. It's part of Russia. And he still believes that Russia is entitled to control what once was controlled by Soviet Union.
And yes, actually, President Macron not only once said that Europe should not rule out the idea of sending troops to Ukraine. So do you believe some European countries should consider direct military involvement if Russia escalates further? I mean, being in Ukraine.
I'm a bit confused by your question. Escalate further. What is further? Can you explain to me what else Russia should do for Europe
That's a
to
good point.
recognize that this
That's a good point. Right.
it's uh, uh, the red line? It's just it's a last stand. As to President Macron, I mean, he made so many statements, I lost count. It's all statements, words. You don't win war by words. You don't win war by consensus. You have to win the war by laying down the strategy. And strategy means, you recognize you are at war. The World War II, which was fought against, Germany in Europe and Japan in Asia, but you're not talking about Putin's armies. You're talking about Wehrmacht. And it was won by strategy. By the strategy laid down by Churchill and Roosevelt. They were leaders. They knew that it had a cost, but also they knew that they had to lay down a plan to make sure that, that they will execute it. Today, we're still, living in kind of a limbo. Not a single Western country, European country or Americans, recall the ambassadors from Moscow. I'm not arguing or advocating to cut diplomatic ties, but at least you have to show your displeasure, your disapproval of Putin's genocidal war. Recall ambassadors. Lower down diplomatic ties. No, Europe is doing business as usual. More than 500,000 visas have been issued for Russians last year. France and Italy are leading. By the way, France and Italy. Hello, President Macron. So it's your talks about, we'll do this and that. It's just Putin is laughing at you. You want to be serious? Okay, you have French military jets. Send some of them to Ukraine. Put something at stake. Illustrate to Putin that you are willing to take a hit. Hit means that there will be risk for your servicemen. Naturally, the Baltic nations, when you look at Estonians, Latvians, Lithuanians, Nordic countries like Finland, they understand that they will be on the front line. They know they will have to fight. But tragic reality is that if something happened in Lithuania, Ukraine is the only country that they can count on. So that's what was part of my cry in war cry in Halifax, is that it's the whole discussion about Ukraine joining NATO or not is irrelevant, because NATO was built for one war only, to stop Russian aggression in Europe. And Ukraine is the only country which is fighting this war, and the entire NATO is trying not to fight this war. So it's like an open invitation to Putin, because the whole story, we will defend in every inch of NATO territory. Remember Joe Biden said, fine, Putin violated NATO airspace many times, zero reaction. He violated NATO maritime borders, zero reaction. Putin's, they say unknown drones, but we can assume that's the Russia was behind it, paralyzed several major European airports, including Brussels and Munich. Reaction? No reaction. No. So that's a problem. Putin is fighting the war. And by the way, Putin's war is not a war against Ukraine only. Ukraine, for Putin, the way they present it, and I'm not speculating, I'm simply translating from Russian to English. This is the war against the global world order run by liberal democracies. Ukraine is one of the obstacles. He always presents it as a puppet of the West. So destroying Ukrainian state with this one step, it's not the final goal of the war. It's one step towards restoring Russian domination in Eastern Europe, which will include, of course, Poland, Hungary, all the countries there, of course, Baltics, but also to repudiate the liberal world order that has been built and served, well or not well, for decades. So it's a global challenge. And well, frankly speaking, European politicians know that. It's when they are on the spot, so on the stage, they always make these very round statements, very ambiguous. The moment you go behind the scene, they say, yeah, of course you're right. They know that, but politically they just can't. They can't accept this responsibility, and it's a problem. The Western democracies look weak, and we know what does always excite the predator in animal world: weakness and blood. And that's exactly what's happening with Putin. He smells blood in Ukraine, and he sees
like a shark. Yes,
absolutely.
Yes, Garry. When the coalition of the willing was created, with the whole my naivety, I have a faith that somehow the Western boots will be on Ukrainian ground protecting us. But they are continuing, repeating and repeat again that they will be here probably, possibly, just after the war will end, which I don't see any signs of it.
Look, in the very beginning of the full-scale invasion, we all hoped that the West at least would close the skies. Now we see they cannot close even their own skies. Again, this is the NATO is trying to avoid the war it was built for. NATO under American presidents like Reagan or Kennedy was a force. Truman, when it was created, or Carter, I mean, any US president. And the Soviet leadership knew that if they cross the border of West Germany, the border was then they would meet American tanks. Nobody had any doubt. Nobody ever questioned Article 5. Today, the moment you say Article 5, they start saying, yes, but it's not exactly. We have to find out why they crossed it. So that's why I believe that it's inevitable that fairly soon Putin will try a small provocation, not full invasion. He doesn't have forces, thanks to Ukraine, to attack Latvia or Estonia. But I think the small incursion somewhere in Latvia, it's very, very likely to prove again that Article 5 doesn't work. But the problem with Article 5, and I talked to many officials and also military personnel, high military personnel in Halifax. It's my latest conversations. And they all confirm that Article 5 is just a piece of paper. Because the very fact that we discuss Article 5 makes it very ambiguous. And Article 5 must be unequivocal. It must be inevitable. The moment you discuss it, it's already weak. And Putin knows that. So that's why the whole concept of NATO is now no longer working. And one of the major challenges is that the NATO as a political structure outlived itself, because it's the one that was built back in 1949. It was Western Europe, and then they added a few other Western European countries. But the core was Western Europe, and nobody had to explain to French, Italians, or West Germans or Dutch why they need NATO. The Soviet tanks were just, on the other side of the border, a few hundred miles away from major European cities. Today, the war is far east by the standards of Portuguese or Spaniards or even French. It's on the river Dnieper, or just actually east of Dnieper. So how do you expect people like in Spain? I mean, the Spanish prime minister. I mean, I don't approve, his policies, but he's running a campaign. There will be elections next year. How do you explain to your voters that you have to increase your military budget 150%, 2.5 times, from 2% to 5%, because there's a war 3,000 kilometers away? It's a losing proposition. And so that's why if we want a European military alliance that will be adequate to the challenge, you have to start reorganizing it. I already heard some words. The Germans, the Poles, they're talking about creating something different, a rapid force based on the countries that have direct interest in the war. So you're talking about Baltic nations, Poles, Finns, Swedes, I'm sure Danes, with Germany behind it, maybe Romania. Ideally, we need Hungary and Slovakia, but unless we have Orban being removed next year at the elections, it's not going to happen. So then you can have countries that can respond instantly. The problem for these countries, they don't have nukes. So that's why you need either France, which I think it's not going to happen because Macron keeps talking, and within the next 2 years, we'll probably see Marine Le Pen party taking over. Britain, maybe Britain. Or now let's be bold. Maybe you just simply need for Germans and Poles to develop nukes. Again, it's not easy to say that the proliferation regime doesn't work, but basically we are having a criminal regime, a Russian fascist dictatorship that's speculating by its a possession of nukes to attack neighboring countries. And frankly speaking, the only way that will stop Putin's aggression, it's a threat of as during the Cold War, threats of mutual annihilation. But that's probably beyond, it's even wildest dreams of European, wildest nightmares of European politicians. But basically, this is the midterm missiles with nuclear warheads on the Polish border aiming at Moscow. That's how you create deterrence, because there are two options: either you enter the war, or you have deterrence. But deterrence should be strong enough, as in during the Cold War, having two components: also one military, another one is political. Soviet leaders, as I already said, never had any doubts about commitments of American presidents to defend Europe. They knew attack on West Germany will be attack on America. We need Russian, whoever is sitting there in Kremlin, it's Putin, to understand that it's a war against much bigger coalition. As of today, they see weaknesses. They see the division. They see attempts to find a middle ground. That's why I didn't hear a single clear statement. Ukraine must win. There's always, this is the nuances. We will stand with Ukraine as long as it takes. So they all try to avoid a clear statement. And in war, it's like in chess. It's black and white. You win or lose.
Yeah, the countries closer to Ukraine, or the countries that are bordering with Russia, they usually say they want us to win. But the further from Ukraine, the less I hear that expression.
But it's Ukraine to win. You have to to identify the goals. For me, it's very clear. It's a full liberation of Ukrainian land, internationally recognized borders. That's a victory. And that's the only chance, as I said, for Russia to go back from this coma, for this mental abyss, by seeing the Ukrainian flag raised in Sevastopol. But that's, is it achievable? I think it's not a wild dream. So yes, it doesn't look possible now. But when you start looking at alternatives, the alternatives, they tell you that unless you have this strategy to win the war by exhausting Russia, and it's not impossible. Russian economy is not in a good shape, and Putin is definitely experiencing more and more problems. But very important that we have the global coalition that makes a clear goal to defeat Putin's Russia in the war, to deny its resources to continue this war, and to make sure that further continuation of the war will have drastic consequences. So far, we have many components. It's not that we're lacking resources. We have all resources: military, financial, economical, but we don't have political will. And we always, dealing with politicians that are trying to, as I say, find a middle ground.
Right. Garry, speaking about nuclear weapon, do you think that such countries as UK and France should consider providing nuclear deterrence to Ukraine in some form, or even transferring nuclear weapon itself? Or is that unrealistic?
It's a question for new alliance. So I say I very, very little hope for France. I'm more optimistic about Britain. So that's why what I would see as a coalition that could be sufficient to deter Russia. It's Britain with its nukes, Germany with its economy, and also Germany can mobilize enough people and ramp up production. I mean, it's the fact that Germany is still just working on increasing its military production. It's almost 4 years into the war. It's just tells you that they were not serious. So Britain and Germany, and then of course you have the countries bordering Russia, 3 Baltic nations, Poles, Finland, Sweden. As I mentioned, Denmark definitely will join. They were impeccable in their support. Probably Romania, and then we'll see what happens with Hungary, Slovakia, and Czech Republic. But this is a coalition that could build its own defense, not waiting for decision in Washington. That's another European problem. Oh, we knew Washington would defend us. No, maybe in 3 years' time you have a different president, but right now you have to live with Donald Trump in the office. Donald Trump is not going to fight for you, so you just have to build your own defense. And Either you rely on British nuclear umbrella, the Brits have nukes, or as I already said, develop your own. This is again, it's a matter of survival. Do you want to protect your independence? Do you want to be a sovereign state? I'm sure Poles have no illusions about Putin's intention. There's a genetic memory for Poles, or for Lithuanians, for Finns, so about Russian aggression. But what can you do if America is not there, or just not willing to play the ball? Start working. And again, it's not rocket science. I'm sure the Germans can develop it. It's a huge undertaking. I understand we change everything. Yes, but it already has changed. The problem is, you can't rely on the structures that are dead. United Nations is dead. NATO is dead. You have to start building something new. Otherwise, you will be dealing with an aggressor that is skillfully using these dead systems. Vampires are always much better by using dead entities to advance his agenda. They always go to the United Nations. They all apply to NATO. They know it doesn't work. So build something that will fight and can bite the aggressor, and just make sure that the cost of future attacks will be unbearable for Putin.
Yes, because the idea of creating something new is already in the air. But I don't know. I thought the same about the United Nations. You know how we call in Ukraine United Nations? United Nations of nothing. So, I mean, they're also doing nothing.
United Nations is the organization that serves dictators now, because it was not built to solve problems. United Nations was built in 1945 to prevent another war. And it worked. It's more like a freezing the conflicts when you had two superpowers. And then they had a kind of proxy wars around the world. And then they were bickering, on the floor of the United Nations. Yeah, but after 1991, we needed something new. We now have to build organizations that bring together countries that have that are real allies, that are not just paying lip service to fundamental values like human rights and liberal democracy, but they live on these values. And right now, we have the direct challenge from Putin. And don't forget, China is behind it. And China is looking not only westward on Ukraine, the outcome of this war, but also eastward to Taiwan. So we have to recognize that the world of tyranny is advancing. And relying on this on the old political entities that are no longer functioning and are dead to defend against it, it's futile. We have to build something new. We have to start, being creative. And again, we have resources. We have money. We have economy behind us. Our economy is much bigger. We have military power. We need to recognize that the war has a cost. Ukraine pays this cost every day, every hour, every minute. And we have the nations that are not willing even just to put one soldier on just in harm's way. Again, big talks. Okay, put your real action behind the talks. Again, back to my question. Is Canadian-led brigade in Latvia has a direct order to shoot at Russians if they cross the border? Answer the question. No answer. That tells you that it tells everything. You have no commitment to fight the war.
Well, I've heard that Estonia, I saw they were training just a few months ago. They were definitely training, and just local residents, they also joining the military trainings in case of Russia.
Again, we know that the locals will fight, but again, this again. My question about this Canadian-led brigade is it's much bigger one. It's basically, is NATO ready to fight if Putin crosses the NATO border? Because again, we saw airspace violated, maritime borders violated, no reaction. Do you seriously believe that Putin will not try to cross the NATO land border? Of course he will. So that's why my question is not hypothetical. It's real one. And what can stop Putin? If he knows that the moment they cross the border, there will be no consultations. The moment you start consulting other members, and 32 members, including many countries that have no interest in this war, that's it. Then it's a lose-lose scenario. So you have to prevent it by saying it in advance. But right now, again, I'm trying to push them. Nobody wants to take responsibility because they used to live under American leadership, and right now they all know America is no longer there, and under Donald Trump it will not be there. So at least 3 more years. They have to rely on themselves, and this is a sad truth that caught them all by surprise.
To be honest, Gary, yesterday after your sharp performance, I thought that lots of European and American leaders, leaders of thoughts, gonna call you or text you and say, Gary, you change our perception of and vision and everything. And I thought that
Look,
it's gonna make some change.
it's as I said, behind the scene, they agree with me, but it's not what they say behind the scene. It's what they say when they're on the limelight. And right now, we don't have political will to build proper defense against inevitable Putin aggression. Putin's speech, the last speech, was absolutely clear. The war would continue. There's no deal. His only deal it's Ukraine's capitulation. And since it's not going to happen, he will continue the war because the war became the oxygen for Putin regime. Putin loses his legitimacy the moment he stops the war without decisive results. So that's why this war, which is a war for global domination, will continue as long as Putin stays in power.
Gary, I have also a few questions left from our audience. So let me ask you, can Russia ever become democratic without first collapsing as an empire? Or is the breakup of Russia is the only realistic path to the real change?
Look, empire cannot be democracy in the 21st century. Yeah, we may look, of course, to the 19th century, to the British Empire. Yes, the empire was democratic, but let's not forget that this is the old traditional empires, colonial empires like Britain. They had the democracy in the metropole, but there was not democracy elsewhere. Russia is a land empire, so that's why it's impossible to have democracy while the imperial mechanisms are still in place. Moscow is still all-powerful center that sucks all the resources from the regions, and in these days, empire can survive only by being aggressive, because if empire is shrinking, it's dying. It means dying. So that it always has to illustrate its strengths, especially when it has one man dictatorship as a form of governance. So my view is that if Russia has a chance of rebuilding itself or just creating a normal national state that's with democratic institutions, it must cease to be an empire. And the first but absolutely mandatory step on this direction is for Ukraine to win and Russia to lose. Nothing short but a decisive defeat in Ukraine can help Russia to find common sense. That's, by the way, Russian history, 200 years. Victories always strengthen regime, whether it was Tsar, Bolsheviks, or Putin. Losses, geopolitical, military losses, always sparked changes or even revolutions.
Yeah, you're right. But when I see Putin, I just saw him on the screen a few days ago, and I see him so confident, so sure that he's gonna win. You know, he's just translating this into the camera. It's
Look, okay, this is whatever. So yes, he's happy now because he believes that he has an ally in Washington, and he also lives in a world where everything is being decided by Moscow, Washington, and Beijing. And since Trump is playing his game, so Putin now feels much better. But that might be a mistake, because again, the resources of the free world, including American resources, they are just not all in the hands of one person, even that powerful as Donald Trump. And by the way, we could see now a lot of discontent in America. Even many Republicans, not officially, but behind closed doors, they put pressure on the administration. Nobody wants to see Ukraine losing and Putin winning. All the numbers, the polls in America, even among Trump supporters, indicate the big support for Ukraine, but much bigger animosity, hatred toward Putin.
yes, and my final one: do many figures in the Russian opposition in the United States continue to hold imperial views, even while they're condemning Putin?
Excuse me, you mean?
Yeah. Okay. Once again, do many figures, people in the Russian opposition that are living in the United States and yeah, they are still, having this imperialistic state of mind views, but they are condemning Putin. Because when I'm opening,
but you said what confused me when you said United States. Most of my Russian politicians or opposition leaders in exile, they live in Europe, not in America. Almost all of them. Yeah.
Okay.
I would say the majority still is trying to find this middle ground. So they always try to find a way to oppose Putin without opposing Putin's aggression. No, they condemn the war, but condemning the war or saying we want peace doesn't mean that they want Putin to lose and Russia to retreat from illegally occupied Ukrainian lands. So if you look at the Russian opposition, there are three segments. One is, which until recently was the biggest one, but it's shrinking. It's the one that, as you described, yes, we're against Putin, but we still think we have to, we have to remember it's Russia. It's the war is really bad. They always say our boys are also dying. So this is one group. It's somehow they think that they will probably come back one day and they will have to take part in elections and they have to be neutral. They have to find the right approach. So again, it's a total. It's, in my view, it's a moral equivalence and it's unacceptable. The second group is that's associated with Michael Khodorkovsky. It stands on the same positions. The war is illegal. Regime is war is criminal. Regime is illegal. Crimea is Ukraine. So we can't pass it instantly, but we have to help Ukraine politically. While we don't want to be engaged in the war. And the smallest one that I belong to, and I probably just it's unofficial leader of the group, believes that we have to help Ukraine in any way possible. We share responsibility for the crimes as Russians, and we have to offer any help, including military assistance. So now, as I said, there's a shift. In the last few months, even few weeks, we could see the shift just towards our position. So I think that the group 2 and 3 already probably have a majority, but we still have a massive Russian audience in exile that is still trying to understand how to position themselves. Unfortunately, major Russian-speaking outlets like Dost, TV Rain, and Medusa, they're all still pretending that we have to be neutral in this conflict while opposing Putin, which, in my view, it's totally just impossible.
Yeah, I don't like that either. To be honest, and even some of the Russian opposition, the third group, as you mentioned, that I'm talking to the studios, they were in shock when they knew that a lot of Russian opposition living in Germany, they were still voting for Putin when there were an election.
Look, it's the fundamental. I recommend you will look at the latest development that will happen in Parliamentary Assembly of Council of Europe, where Putin's Russia has been kicked out in 2022, and now they offer these seats for Russian democratic opposition, and there's still a big battle within. So, and one of its elements is that, are we going to represent Russia or Russians in exile, Russians against Putin? And we have some of our colleagues say, no, we have to be Russia. And myself and Michael Khodorkovsky, we say, no, we clearly represent Russians who are against Putin. As we say, this is simple, the triad. War is criminal, regime legitimate, Crimea is Ukraine. You have to say that. Berlin Declaration that we signed all in May 2023 states very clearly. It also talks about the dismantling of imperial mechanisms in Russia. And also one of the important elements, as you often see, it's a flag. So it's a white, blue, white. And as anybody who's trying to say, no, we have to fight for our tricolor. Absolutely. That's the line. And European Assembly, so this is the Parliament Assembly of Council of Europe, made it also a conditional. So in the resolution, they talk about the Berlin Declaration and also about the flag. So you have to make very clear that you separate it from Putin. So we are no longer, pretending we can speak on behalf of Russia. Putin's Russia. Right now, it's a fascist dictatorship conducting the criminal war. We are talking about those Russians who cut ties with Putin, maybe a few millions. We don't know the exact number. And those who are willing to build what I call half jokingly Russian Taiwan. As long as Putin's there, we have to create, it's a Russian entity that is unequivocal against Putin and fully backing Ukraine in its just war to liberate its land.
Garry, thank you so much. It was such a pleasure for me to have you
Okay.
here, to listen to you. And thank you so much for you being as a oppositioner in the third group, as you mentioned. So thank you so much, and Slava
Thank you.
Ukraini.
Okay. Героям слава.